Right, good evening everyone, and welcome again to Tara House. So tonight's the last of my 3 sessions I'm doing for this month, and what I want to focus a bit on tonight is the idea of reducing our interest in this life and why we should do that. So at the moment, we're all completely equal in that we're looking for happiness and we're trying to avoid unhappiness or problems or suffering in our life. And the question, of course, is, are we doing that in the wisest or most skillful manner possible? So currently at the moment, we lack or don't have a lot of freedom within ourselves, or a lot of inner freedom. And if we look at reducing our interest in this life, that will help us develop a bit more freedom. So at the moment, we have things like our self-grasping attitude that constrains us or constricts our inner freedom and the openness of our mind and the happiness of our mind, the peacefulness of our mind. Because we, as I've said before, we're dominated by this false sense of I, which we totally and utterly believe in. And the illusory appearances around us, we see them as real and concrete. We have attachment and grasping arising, and then we can have anger, jealousy, and a whole bunch of negative emotions or harmful emotions that impact our well-being and inner happiness. Then on top of the self-grasping attitude, which is always with us, we have another attitude called the self-cherishing attitude. And the self-cherishing attitude is where we put our own happiness ahead of others. And in reality, we're just one individual in the whole universe. And like I said earlier, we're all equally seeking to be happy and to avoid unhappiness. There is absolutely no difference between ourselves and everyone else in terms of that. Where the difference is the methods or the techniques that we might use to try and find some sort of happiness. So for some people, their work might be the area of where they get their happiness. For other people, it might be their relationships. Other people, it might be adventure sports, or spending a lot of time in the gym. Or other people might be the type of music they listen to, or the type of food they eat, or the sort of people they hang out with. There's a whole range of things that we do in pursuit of happiness in this life. Now, some of those things can be skillful, but some of those things are going to bring problems for us. And last time I talked a bit about the 8 worldly concerns, and they came in pairs. So one was sort of wanting material gain and avoiding loss. The next one was seeking pleasure or comfort and avoiding displeasure or discomfort. The next pair was seeking reputation or fame and avoiding disgrace. And the last one was hearing pleasant words, in other words, praise, and not wanting to hear criticism or unpleasant words. And the ones that are the ones we don't want, they're sort of obvious. That we tend that how those things influence our the well-being of our mind and our inner calmness or peace, and how these things, if they occur, can quite easily destabilise us or upset us quite a lot, because we're fairly attached to the opposite. So we're attached to material gain, we're attached to praise, we're attached to fame, and we're attached to pleasure. But if we look at those forms and think, well, isn't that okay? Isn't it okay to have lots of material things? And that's a yes or no answer, because it really depends on our mental attitude towards those things. And I guess I should say that when we're looking at reducing our interest in our life, I'm talking here about an inner change rather than an external change. I'm not saying we need to give everything away or live in a very ascetic life or very simple life, but it's more the inner attitude we have towards these things. And at the moment, because we've got attachment and grasping for these things, that takes away our freedom. It takes away our inner happiness or peace and our sort of deep mental stability, if you like. So if we look, for example, at people, let's say the assumption is that the more I have, the happier I should be. And from a mathematical point of view, we say there's, so we might think there's a correlation there. It might be a linear correlation or something like that. So as one gets bigger, the other one should get bigger. Now the reality is we can explore or investigate our own experience in terms of our own life to see, did that really happen? When we got more of something, were we actually happier? Did it bring some more peace or comfort to our mind? Or did it actually perhaps go the opposite way for us? And also, so apart from looking at our own experience, we can sort of look around at the people that we're aware of who do have a lot of wealth or possessions, etc., and the good job and all that. And do they really seem to have a lot more, do they have more joy and happiness in their life than what we do, if they've got more than us? And I guess if anyone, I don't know, I presume some people in the room might know people who are extremely well off or have a lot of that. And the reality is we don't really see that. And we look at our own experience, see how we've tried to, so we've, instead of having an old car, we've got a new car. Instead of an old bed, we've got a new bed. The house might be better than what we started off with when we were younger. But in reality, as we've got more stuff, has our life become better and happier as a result of that? Or has it perhaps that those things own us more? Means we've got more of these things, so we're more worried about losing the condition of them. And that takes up more of our life energy, if you like, away from things that might perhaps be more important for us. So that's sort of the material gain side. If we look at the comfort and pleasure, it's very easy to try and set ourselves up so we have more comfort in our life. So our house is more comfortable, our car is more comfortable, our work environment is more comfortable, more pleasant. But again, has all that increase and that sort of stuff made our life happier or better? And again, that's something for us to investigate. And I was just sort of thinking, just had a recollection of memories. When my parents got married, which was 1951, so it's a while ago, my father lived on my grandfather had a farm, so he had, I think, most of his children living on his farm as well. So when my father got, so he had a couple of his sisters, at least one other sister and one other brother, and they had wives and young children. So what happened in this house, which was a big farmhouse, is my mother she didn't have children at that stage, so she ended up sort of looking at doing more work than what my father thought was fair. So they actually moved out and put up a tent in a back paddock, and we're talking probably about 5,000 or 6,000 acres. It was 5 miles to the nearest road, so they had a old canvas army tent, kerosene lamps. There was no refrigerator. The main food was rabbit, being 1951, 1952. And obviously there's plenty of wood around, have a fire, etc. So they had an incredibly simple life. And I know at that time my mother was, they were very happy. Although it would have been really cold in winter and warm in summer, then I came along, so we lived in the tent for another year. And I think if you're looking after a little kid under those conditions where there's no running water, the toilet would be a hole in the ground somewhere, no refrigerator, it would have been, what we would think of as hardship. But interestingly, they were happy. They were quite happy. And then, eventually, my father, another kid was my father thought, maybe we should move out of the tent. So he got a job with. By that time, his father had died, and his brother wasn't so friendly to him. So he moved out, got a job elsewhere. Then we went to another farm, and so that was. But it was very interesting. It was a very, very simple life, very basic. But they were happy and content at that stage. So that's so I'm trying to illustrate here. It's not necessary for us to have a lot to be happy, and sometimes having a lot is actually a burden, and that makes our life more difficult and more complex in many respects. So that's the comfort and pleasure one. The next one, fame. And this is really interesting, because if you've got a lot of fame, it's actually a huge burden. And I knew a guy once called John Schwartz, who used to be a Hollywood producer, and he knew Steve McQueen. And anyone who's older, all the old people will know Steve McQueen, the young ones won't. So we know something they don't, so we can gloat. But he was one of the Hollywood icons, the good-looking sort of male sort of guy, well fit and all that. But because he was so famous, he had absolutely no privacy. He couldn't go anywhere, and sort of be, just be a normal person. So he actually went through a stage where he ate a lot and became really, really fat, grew a beard, so he was unrecognisable. So he could then just go and do something really simple, like sit at a bus stop and enjoy that. Yeah, and probably most of us don't use buses, but we take it for granted. If we sit at a bus stop or railway station or wander through the shops, no one's going to pay attention to us, because very fortunately we're nobodies. Yeah? I don't see Princess Di in the room, I don't see King Charles in the room, I don't see Pink or some of the other more younger famous pop stars in the room. We only see ourselves, and I'm not aware of anyone here that's famous, so there's no burden for us. So we're sort of lucky. So, yeah. But but the irony is, when you're young, you think, wouldn't it be fantastic to be famous, or wouldn't it be, even to know someone who's famous? So you sort of get some of the reflected glory of knowing someone who's famous, but actually it doesn't bring happiness at all. It's just a burden. And the next one was sort of the pleasant words or praise. And I was sort of thinking, is that my youngest daughter went travelling a couple of years ago, so in order to communicate with her, I had to sort of download Messenger onto my computer. And I'd spent many years very strongly resisting going onto Facebook, because I don't think I want to give Mr. Zuckerberg any more money or attention. But I sort of had to succumb. And Facebook's been an interesting experience for me. So obviously you get to sort of, I guess, have contact with friends, people I've known, say, 40 or more years ago, who live in different countries, for example, different parts of Australia. But also what's interesting, a lot of people to some extent live their life on Facebook and post a range of things, and then people post likes, or I might occasionally post a picture of somewhere I've been, and people post likes. And it's very interesting. The like comes up. It's very interesting, easy to be sort of swayed by that, getting the like reaction when you post something on Facebook. And I know certainly younger people, for some of them, it's really hard. Because they're very insecure in terms of their own identity, and some of their life is lived out on Facebook rather than sort of interacting with people face to face in a real manner. And so, likes as part of their world, whether they're getting them or not, can create a lot of pain or unhappiness or suffering for them. So it's sort of interesting in terms of that. And of course, if someone criticises us, whether it's to our face or I guess on Facebook, again, that can be hard for us to handle. So what's happening here? These 8 worldly concerns, we're under their influence a lot. Yeah, and that's throughout our life. Yeah, the 8 worldly concerns can often motivate or drive the sorts of things we're doing. Yeah, like some people go to work. Why are they going to work? Yeah, they don't enjoy the work. They're going to work because they want the money so they can have their holiday or their car or their house or whatever. And look, we do need those things. I'm not saying we don't need those things, but it's more the motivation that we have behind doing these activities. And if the motivation is for the well-being of this life only, it's not going to go far for us or bring a lot of inner success for us. Yeah, it'll bring the outer trappings for us, and as we sort of mentioned now, we can investigate ourselves. Those outer trappings don't necessarily bring us actual happiness at all. We can actually become the servant to these things instead, and it's actually a lot harder. Yeah, it becomes a burden. Now, the other thing is that, of course, as I've, I guess, said the last couple of times, is this life is relatively short. Yeah, for some people it's shorter, for other people it's longer. But in terms of the big picture of time, and we can look at sort of modern history and go, 2,000 years ago was Christ, 2,500 years ago was Buddha, the ancient Egyptians were a bit before that, the Aboriginal people who were obviously the first people here in Australia, they've been here at least 40,000 years, potentially 100 or 120,000 years. Yeah, so in terms of that scale of time, our lifespan of, the biblical lifespan of 70 years or 70 years, which some of us have passed. Yes, I can see the odd septuagenarian around the room. It's pretty short. Really short. And it's like a bubble. Yes, in some of the classic texts, they talk about a dewdrop on grass, or a bubble of water, or a flash of lightning on a dark light. In other words, our life is very brief. But at the moment, we have a human life which is incredibly rare and incredibly precious. Yet we have enormous, unbelievable potential. We have this inner potential, which, when we use the Buddhist language, is called Buddha nature. So it's the nature of mind. If we take away all the obscurations and the conceptual thoughts and all that sort of stuff, is something that's incredibly pure. Now, and the nature of the mind is what's clear in Tibetan, Selsing Ripa, or clear and knowing. Now, it's got a nature of clearness, and it's able to be aware and have wisdom. And when we do our meditation, we can get some tiny inkling or taste of that. And if we progress on the spiritual path long enough, we can deepen that experience more and more and more, with the ultimate goal being that we realise or uncover our perfect Buddha nature or Buddha awareness. In other words, we become a being who is free of any faults or shortcomings and who's developed all their qualities. So the faults we're free of is things like grasping at this life, the self-cherishing, the eye-grasping ignorance. Then the qualities we develop will be the wisdom of understanding reality as it is, the quality of universal love and compassion, the quality of being utterly and completely dedicated, committed to alleviating the suffering and pain of others and leading them to a similar state. So we can develop we have the potential to develop those sorts of qualities because we are human beings born in an environment which is relatively safe, we have adequate resources, and we've actually met people such as Geshe Doga, His Holiness Dalai Lama, who have the realisation or have those inner qualities, and therefore the skill and the ability to lead us on the path like that. And so that sort of occurrence is very, very rare, in the big picture. Right? Even in terms of in Australia or on the earth in general, there are lots of places where that's definitely not the case. Now there are people who are following different spiritual traditions, and not sort of saying that they're not okay at all. And if you've got someone who's following a spiritual tradition where they're trying to develop a good heart, trying to have more interest in the future life and less in this, trying to reduce their selfishness and their ego, this is a really good thing. But I'm not sure about how many qualified teachers are out there. I know for myself, when I was a uni student, I spent a number of years living in a theological college. I wasn't a theological student, it's just they didn't have enough theological students to fill the room, so they took in ordinary uni students like myself. And look, they were ordinary people like you and I. The people who were their teachers, their lecturers, were ordinary people as well. And so I wasn't aware of what I would call a living lineage of people who have come from the time of their founder, which in this case is Jesus Christ, up to the present time, who had his qualities and realisations, which gets passed on to the next person. They then do the practice, develop those qualities, pass it on, etc. I'm not really aware that there's a lineage like that exists. But within Tibetan Buddhism, without a doubt, there is a living lineage which can be traced all the way back to the Buddha, where we still have people who are developing those qualities to the fullest extent and then passing them on. So for us to be able to connect with a lineage like that is really amazing and an extraordinary thing. And it's incredibly rare, because it takes very powerful causes in terms of what we've done in the past, to bring us to a place like we are here and now, and to be able to sort of have that interest within ourselves to contemplate the teachings, try and develop ourselves. And I can think, for example, when I was travelling, I'd been on the road for 18 months or so, and ended up back in Kathmandu, and I ran into a Dutch friend of mine. But on the way on my travels, I'd heard of this place called Kopan. And Kopan's a monastery sort of on the edge of the Kathmandu Valley, which was set up by Lama Yeshe and Zopa, Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, who were the inspiration of the setting up of Tara House and other centres throughout the world. And this Dutch friend of mine, he had an idea of where Kopan was. So we got the bus out from Kathmandu out to Bodh one day, and we started walking, but we got hopelessly lost. So it took about 4 or 5 hours to travel what should have been a 1 hour walk. But I've got great photographs, walking through rice fields and villages, and all that was really, really nice. So we got there towards the end of the day, and I signed up for the course. This is mid-October. Then we went back to Kathmandu and went back in November. But what was interesting is this guy, he said, look, Buddhism, I have lots of respect for Buddhism and all that, but he didn't have the karma or the connection to ever go there. What was really interesting, probably quite a few months later, I ran into again, and his path had taken him down the road of magic mushrooms. And he thought he'd found liberation by taking magic mushrooms. Whereas it gave him, look, it was interesting because the mushrooms, how do we say, dissolved his solid concept of himself, that experience, and gave him a deeper insight. The world's not quite as concrete as what I think. But he didn't realise that this was just a chemical he was putting in his body. Of course, once the chemical faded, he went back to where he was and all that. But it's quite interesting. So I'm trying to illustrate here that what we've got today, each one of us, is really rare and unique. And it won't. The other thing, of course, is it won't last a long time. And so our challenge, of course, is we need to make sure that our life is meaningful, that we don't waste too much of our life. And by wasting our life, I'm talking more about the inner attitude, not the external things in terms of what we do, but sometimes as we do change our inner attitude, of course, the external stuff will change as well. Like in my case, I used to be an entomologist once upon a time. I was an insect scientist, so I had a career dedicated to working out how to control insects. I worked at a cotton research station for a little while, and I worked at sheep blowfly for a while, and then I went travelling. But, having a job that involves how do I dedicate my life to working out the best way to sort of kill insects wasn't the best job. So I never went back to that for obvious reasons. There was a change there. One of the very small, yes, I suppose. Other things haven't changed too much. I still like my rugby league, for example, or cricket. That hasn't gone. But anyway, if my team loses, I'm more philosophical. But look, what's really important is if we're aware of the value of this life and also the temporary nature of this life, we've got to make sure that we get some profit out of this life. In other words, when this life finishes, we've done something, good. We've made some progress. Now, the other thing I'm going to say is we have to be careful when we look back. There's going to be things we did we look back and think, I shouldn't have done that. I wasn't very smart when I did that, or I wish I'd done that instead. There's no point beating ourselves up. We've got to accept ourselves and go easy on ourselves. Also, we have to be careful with not squeezing ourselves too tight, right? Because we want to loosen up the mind, not tighten ourselves up. So we've got to be careful there. But within that, we do need to sort of, make sure we're motivating ourselves to try and use our life, this precious human life we've got, as best as we can, both for our own benefit and also for the benefit of the people who are around us. Because as we become a better being, that's going to have an impact on the people around us as well, and an influence. And of course, especially if we develop the attitude, look, I'm trying to use my life as much as possible to benefit others, and this includes trying to develop myself spiritually as well, so I'm more skilled or more able to help others. And this becomes a fantastic or really, really good thing for us to do, within the context of how we lead our life now. And so it's the inner attitude that we're trying to transform in terms of all that. And, being aware of the shortcomings of following the eight worldly concerns, of following the self-grasping, of following the self-cherishing, of following the different delusions, etc., like anger and jealousy and pride and all that, being aware of all those shortcomings. Then we try gradually to move ourselves away from those. And as we learn more, we can start with very simple meditation, such as watching our breath, for example, and then we can start doing more with this analytical sort of meditation, where we might do an analytical meditation on the value and preciousness of this life, or how short our life is, or the nature of suffering, or the nature of problems in this life. So we develop more and more, I need to turn away from interest in this life. And then, of course, we start to look, okay, if I turn away from interest in this life and try to work to make sure the next life is going to be better, set up the causes for that. So I look at the sort of actions I'm doing and the karma I'm creating, right, to make sure the karma I'm creating and the imprints I'm leaving my mind stream are beneficial or positive rather than ones that sort of disturb my mind or are negative or harmful. So we work in that way. We can start to sort of focus, okay, I'm going to try and get a better life so I can progress on the path. And then, of course, we extend the motivation that I need to get freedom from what's in Sanskrit called samsara, or in English we talk about cyclic existence. And cyclic existence or samsara, it's not a place as such, it's the way we experience the world, ourselves and the world around us. That's what cyclic existence is. And each action we do sort of then propels the next, and it keeps us trapped in what's called the wheel of life or cyclic existence. And when you walk in through the door in there, you'll see a picture of the wheel of life. And that has a thing called the 12 links of dependent origination. So we start with one thing, leads to the next, leads to the next, that leads to the next, etc. And in the middle, you've got 3 animals, a snake, a chook or a rooster, and a pig. So one symbolises anger, the snake, of course, the rooster or chook symbolises attachment, and the pig symbolises ignorance. So from ignorance we get attachment and anger or hatred, and then the other things flow. And then we have our actions that flow from these things, which keep us cycling from one existence to the next, to the next, to the next. And then within that picture you see an image of a Buddha or enlightened being standing outside the wheel, sort of pointing the way in terms to become free. And so our next motivation becomes, okay, how do I become free? And so then we're sort of seeking liberation from being under the control of ignorance or the various delusions or the afflictive emotions and karma. This is what propels us from one existence to the other. And then if we go beyond that in terms of our motivation, say, well, look, I'm not the only one in cyclic existence. And if we look around, everyone else is in the same boat as me. And as we become more aware of our own reality, our own existence, and what the shortcomings of that are, and we develop more understanding of our own suffering and our own problems, that actually allows us to develop more compassion. It's an interesting irony there, because Buddhism talks a lot about love and compassion, but it also talks a lot about things like suffering and the sort of stuff I've been talking about tonight. And the irony is to develop compassion, we naturally need to understand ourselves first, become aware of our own suffering, our own problems, our own limitations, the fact that we're also trapped. And the more we're aware of our own stuff and have compassion towards ourselves, then we've got more space to be open to having compassion for others, where it's just going to automatically develop. If we've got that experience ourselves, and I'm sure we've all had the experience, we've had something occur in our lives, say whether it's some sort of sickness. In my case, I've had hepatitis and I've had malaria, for example. So, if someone says I've got hepatitis or malaria, not that I normally run across them in Australia with that, because I've had that experience, I've got a bit more understanding of what they're going through. And we've all had experiences which when someone else talks, we've had that experience, so it's easier for us to be empathetic and to understand that. So the more we understand our own inner experience, the more we'll have understanding of the experience that other people are going through and how they're under the control of the various afflictions arising in their mind, how they're under control of their anger and their jealousy and their pride and the suffering that brings, under control of their ignorance, not understanding reality, understanding their selfishness and all that. We can see that they're driven by that, and we've got enough space in ourselves not to be reactive towards, having a reactive emotion towards them, but more to understand that here's a suffering being because they're trapped by these things, they lack inner freedom. And so ultimately when we start to see that, we can start to develop this mind, think, gee, I wish you could be free. How can I help you? And of course what we realise, we don't have the skill set really to help people as much as we would like. And so this is where the aspiration is, well, who does have that skill set? And the people or the individuals who have that skill set are the enlightened beings, the highly realised practitioners. And so we develop that aspiration, that I want to become a highly realised practitioner, an ultimately enlightened being, with the intention that I can help, liberate all beings. That's the intention. So we have to fulfil our own purpose first, which is liberate ourselves first. so we can then fulfil the purpose or the benefit for others as well. So there's sort of quite a path there, which was, and so part of all this thing is this is sort of some of the things we can try and aspire to and aim our life towards, so that when our life finishes, we can feel happy because we've tried to do something really positive with our life. We can do that. Rather than when we get to the end of our life, we have fear or regret or unhappiness. Without doubt, there are people who have that experience, and there are people who have the opposite. And I can remember decades ago, Lama Zopa talking about that if you've done a lot of practice, you'll get to the point and where you're actually getting excited, looking forward to death. But you know that with your meditation you can transform that process. Go into deep meditation at the time of death. And the High Lamas all do that. They'll go into what's called clear light meditation. It might be for a few days, or some cases like a fortnight. The breathing is stopped, but the body doesn't decay. That's we're not used to that. So their breathing stops, but they're just in deep meditation for that period of time. And then eventually at a certain point in time, their consciousness will leave the body, and then from that time on, then the body will start to decay. And then they'll come back, and someone will usually find their reincarnation, they come back again, go through the monastic system, start to study. Some will leave the monk sort of life or nun life, but come back as extra special people. And anyone who's met reincarnated lamas, a lot of them are pretty special people, and that sort of comes across fairly quickly in terms of that. So for those sorts of people, because of the way they've led their life, and potentially for us, you can actually be looking forward to death. I know a friend of mine, Australian monk called Gyatso, and some of you may have met him. He was in Bendigo for quite a while. He's basically he's from the old hippie era, so he's like, "Bring it on, baby," was his comment. The last time, one of the last more recent times I was talking to him, but he's absolutely ready. He's spent done a lot of deep practice. The next level is, look, you don't want to die, but at the same time you've got no regrets. And obviously, I guess for more ordinary people, we hope we get to that point there, that through our practice, through our life, and the various deeds, actions we've done, we develop more kindness, we develop more calmness, we let go of the ego a bit. So when it comes time to die, we're ready to let go and maintain a peaceful life and move on to the next existence. Then there are other people, it can be a fearful, terrifying process. And probably I know I can remember hearing a guy being interviewed on the radio once. He was I think an emergency care doctor or something like that. And this guy came in and had a heart attack, I think, and the guy was absolutely terrified, completely utterly terrified, never seen anyone like that before. But they were able to revive him. But the next day when the doctors went to talk to him about that, so about his experience, he couldn't remember a thing. Couldn't remember it all. He said, I guess the trauma had been so deep he just shut it out. But what this doctor did then was said, well, let's do some research and see if I can find more examples of this. So actually he went out and did more research. He wrote a book about the different people with those sorts of experiences. Mostly when we hear about near-death experiences, you're going to the white light, it's peaceful and all that sort of stuff. And that's certainly the case for some people, but for other people it's not. So I guess the message here is we do need to be careful about how we live our life, and the sorts of things that we do. Because we are creating karma, putting imprints in our mind stream, and those things will come back. So if we've been a nasty, unpleasant person all our life, I'd be a bit worried about what the experience is going to be at the time when the elements in the body start, and this elements start to absorb, and the consciousness start to absorb what arises in that person's mind at that time, if they're habituated towards having a negative mind. And for us really what we're trying to do is to habituate ourselves so we have a really positive, kind, warm, open mind instead. And that then becomes the best preparation for us in terms of leaving this life and going to the next life. I reckon I've gone over time. Now we have to transfer the next part of the session. So we finish one life, the teaching side. Okay, so let's get you to stretch a little bit and wriggle. So you're going to be nice and comfortable. And then, look, once we're ready, we'll just sit with a nice straight back and make the head forward a little bit, eyes almost closed, right hand on top of the left hand, thumbs touching. That apparently has an influence how the energy flows through our system. Elbows out slightly. And then we just become aware of our breath, passing in through our nostrils all the way down to our tummy and back out. So we'll just do that for a few minutes to allow our mind to stabilise and settle, and for us to sort of enter, I guess, sort of a more deep inner space, which is a little bit quieter and a little bit away from what we've been involved in today. And I should say, if we have any thoughts come up or even physical sensations, we're not trying to push them away, we just accept them. But also we're not going to investigate them or get involved in them either. Because these energies will arise, and then if we leave them alone, they'll dissipate of their own accord. So now what I want you to do is just to pick one of those 8 worldly concerns I talked about before, whether it's the material gain, whether it's the pleasure and comfort, whether it's the fame or whether it's the praise, and just explore your experience with one of those and what impact it had on your mind, and whether it actually disturbed your mind or reduced your happiness, or it increased your mind and increased your inner peace or not. So just pick one and just explore that and try and get some sort of sense of feeling of whether being under the influence of that was good for you or not. Okay, so we'll draw our meditation to a close, and when you're ready, open your eyes. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time if anyone's got any questions they want to ask.
Can you please explain how Buddhists see karma a little bit more?
Okay, so the question is, how do Buddhists see karma? Now this gives me a chance to do some advertising, because purely by coincidence, Damien's leading the next 4 weeks in September, and his topic is karma. So, and karma, there's a lot of detail there, so it'll be good. But in brief, when we do actions of body, speech and mind, they leave an imprint on our consciousness. It's like dropping a stone in a pond, which sets out ripples. It's also called the law of cause and effect. So an experience and effect, you need to create the cause. So if it's something good that you want, you need to create the cause. If it's something bad you don't want, you make sure you don't create the cause. So there's things like that. Then now, karma will ripen eventually. But normally speaking, it won't ripen in this lifetime. It's more likely to ripen sometime in the future. Now there are some exceptions to that. If when you're young you create karma with your parents, and the reason your parents have showed incredible kindness towards you, so the karma you create with them is stronger than the karma you create with ordinary people. Or if you create karma with very highly realised meditators as well, that karma is stronger as well. So again, that has potential to ripen in this lifetime. Also, if you're a very pure being, then your karma will ripen a lot quicker as well. But for ordinary people such as ourselves or me, then the karma I tend to create this lifetime will more likely to ripen next lifetime. And what I'm experiencing this life now is a result of karma I've created in the past. Now, the question, of course, is if everything we do is related to karma, do we have freedom? And to some extent, yes, there is freedom. And I like Lama Yeshe used to talk about the idea that the amount of it's like living in a dictatorship. You've got some freedoms, you don't have complete freedom. Because our karma sort of, to some extent, propels our life and the sort of habits that we have. But because we've got a range of karma sitting in our mind stream, the sorts of things that we do will ripen different sorts of karma or different seeds. So if you're in a positive state of mind, then your positive types of karma are going to ripen. If you're in a negative state of mind, then it's more likely that a negative type of karma will ripen. So we've got some influence there. We can increase the power of our karma, so things like the motivation we do an action with, and at the end the dedication we have in terms of how we mentally project that karma, if you like, can increase the power of the karma. Good karma we can weaken by strong negative anger, for example, or delay its ripening. There's things like that. But there's a huge amount of detail on karma. I mean, Damien will go into things probably called the 10 non-virtues. In other words, the things in speech we have, like killing, stealing and sexual misconduct, for example, we shouldn't do, or telling lies, hard speech, slander, those sorts of, he'll talk about those sorts of details in terms of later on. But obviously what we're trying to do is make sure that we're creating good or positive karma all the time. I guess to some extent, if we've got very subtle awareness or clear awareness for our mind, we can see what creates a positive vibration and what creates a negative vibration. And so we're doing the so-called good actions will create a positive vibration in our mind stream, and the negative actions will clearly create a negative imprint in our minds. And we might be sensitive enough to feel that vibration a little bit, but it depends how sensitive we are. But it's good to learn the lists and all the details and stuff like that, so that we're more aware of how we're leading our life. And then to some extent we can get to the point where with things we might have done in the past, we view that with fear because we're now aware of the karmic consequences of that. Because when we do actions, we build the habit to do that action again, but it also has a throwing aspect of its complete karma in terms of the type of rebirth that we might have. So in my case, for example, I lived on a farm when I was young. I unfortunately killed a lot of things because that was sort of the culture and the environment I was in. And so when I look at that karma, that actually frightens me. The thing is, I've created the karma to be killed myself and also to be born in an environment which might be intense suffering as well, which I don't want. Have I talked enough? I don't want to take away too much from David, but that you can talk for a long, long time on karma. And look, it's really important to develop, and look, it takes a long time to develop faith in karma. In other words, our actions have consequences. There are good, there are positive actions, negative actions, and the positive actions obviously will end up with good results, the negative actions will end up with, or the harmful actions will end up with negative results. And it's sort of logical. You know, if you plant an apple seed, you get an apple tree. You plant a blackberry seed, you'll get a prickly bush, prickly blackberry bush, or you'll also get some nice fruit. So there's a range of things like that. So they're sort of logical. That give you enough to think about today? Okay. Yes?
You mentioned the word logic, so within the context of Buddhist theory, is there any logical reason why the impact of karma would be delayed until another life?
Well, okay, so the question is in terms, if I'm talking about logic, if we do something negative, a strongly negative action such as anger, why that would delay the ripening of a good karma. Okay, so there's a bit of detail on which, I guess the karmas are all in a queue to some extent on your mind stream. And it's like when you start cooking, there are bubbles coming up, aren't there? And maybe there's an order to the bubbles coming up, I'm not sure, but wherever the heat source is where the bubbles will come up more, but away from the heat the bubbles will come up less. So what ripens first what's happening with karma also, while it's sitting on our mind stream, it's expanding. And that's why I deliberately gave the analogy earlier that when you drop a little pebble into a pond, you create ripples that are going out. And one of the actions that we do in our life, we're not independent. We create ripples with the people we influence, don't we? So even the tiniest tiny things or the big things create ripples. So one of the problems with karma is that it's continually expanding. And so, if a karma today, in 18 days' time, might be this much stronger, or this much, becomes equivalent, much more and more stronger. And so the order of the ripening of karma depends on which one's the strongest that's going to come up, but also what's going on in your mind stream at the moment. So if we have an explosion of anger coming up, we might have had a positive karma that was going to come up, but that explosion of anger supersedes that, so other karmas might be energised to come up instead, so it gets delayed or potentially even weakened. And this is what the texts say. I do have to say that within Buddhism there are 3 levels of phenomena. There's what's called the obvious stuff, so we can see, for example, we're going to die. There's the hidden stuff, and there's the extremely hidden. Now the hidden stuff is stuff that requires a chunk of work. So like the realisation of emptiness, for example, or the deep understanding we've got being a future or past lives. Okay, then the extremely hidden stuff is a lot of the stuff to do with karma. So to some extent it's a matter of, some of it's logical for us and we can see in our own life in terms of what we do, so we gradually develop faith in karma. Some of it is because we develop faith in the Buddha, we then think, okay, that faith then, or the Buddhist teachings, that then sort of also goes with karma. We have faith in karma as well. I know, for example, one of the things and within Buddhists talk about, faith is talked about a lot, and there are different sorts of faith. So there's a blind faith, there's the faith with reasoning, and I guess there's a faith with experience, or a combination of reasoning then leading to experience. And ideally what we want is to use a good amount of reasoning or logic, because that's a stronger sort of faith. A faith just based on devotion can waver a lot more and be a lot harder. You can go up and down a lot more. Having said that, I've certainly known people who have had enormous amount of devotional faith and have become amazing people, just for that really, really deep devotion. I can think of one French nun I knew years ago called Michelle. She had enormous devotion to Lama Zopa, and she sort of stayed out of the limelight a lot, which is smart, because then people don't give you jobs and stuff like that. So she kept a low profile, but later in life she developed a lot of qualities, and Lama Zopa used to advise people, go and listen to her, get her to teach. But she developed some deep inner qualities as a result of her sustained practice, and especially her devotion to her teacher. Also Lama Zopa's mother was another one. Illiterate woman, very simple, brought up in the mountains of Nepal, but she developed a lot. She became a nun as an half. The husband died early, so she brought up, three or four kids, brought them up, and then later on became a nun, and worked at a place called Lauda, which is where Lama Zopa had been in his previous life, and had built a small monastery there. So she became the caretaker of that. And she used to recite a lot of Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. Now, for those who know, Om Mani Padme Hum is a mantra of compassion. And you'll see Tibetans or Tibetan Buddhists like the Darkies and that constantly reciting Om Mani Padme Hum as a way to help develop compassion. So she would I forget what, it might have been 60,000 mantras a day or something like that. So what happened is when she died, she actually went into clear light meditation for a few days, and they were able to... But even before she died, she'd met this pregnant lady who said, look after this baby. And the irony is, I don't know how, but that baby ended up being her reincarnation. But so she, just through simple devotion, she developed a lot of qualities. So you can do it through devotion, but for us, our culture, devotions, I think my next door Greek Orthodox neighbour, she had a lot of devotion. God will look after me when I die. And she was a lovely person. But modern Western culture, where we have this scientific, rational attitude, devotion's not a strong part of our culture for a lot of people. So we need to use our analysis and investigation. And to some extent, with the meditation we did tonight, I was getting you to use, to investigate your own experience. And if that rang true, you think, that resonates with me. That'll help develop a little bit more faith or devotion. So then you go the next step, the next step, the next step. So it sort of progresses like that. Okay, have I said enough? Yes.
I don't know if it's going to sound really naive or not, so excuse me. It seems kind of a little punitive, or at odds with the notion of unconditional love, compassion that we show everybody, to this idea of, I get the cause and effect, and I understand consequences, but sort of punishment in a way. I don't know, maybe I'm not...
Okay, that's a good question. So you sort of, how do we say, we're roaming around the idea of, love and compassion, karma, and somewhere in amongst there is there punishment.
Yeah, in a way. So I know, I'm a parent, you're a parent.
Mm-hmm.
You love your children. Of course, you need to teach them the right, the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But this sense of wanting to punish them for something forever or for a long time or into the next life just doesn't sort of, I don't know, it just seems at odds with compassion and love, but unless I'm not getting the compassion, maybe the compassion is the consequence that you're giving them.
I think we've got some Catholic influence coming through here, haven't we?
Pardon?
I think we might have some Catholic influence coming through here, in terms of what you're saying.
Much Catholic influence. Yeah.
Okay. Is there external punishment? No. We create our own karma. We reap the consequences of what we do. It's as simple as that. It's not some external thing out there meting out the punishment or judging you. We're creating our own reality. And now, the thing is, we can create our own reality, which is an environment of hell. An environment of hell, or an experience of hell. We can create that reality for ourselves. We see that sometimes with people with schizophrenia, for example, or deeply depressed. They're not whether it's a form of a frozen cold hell. They can't move, they're cracking up. Now I should say the Buddhist texts, and maybe you won't love this, have some incredibly graphic descriptions, literal descriptions of hell realms. Right? Very graphic, very, very literal. And they talk about 8 hot hells, 8 cold hells, neighbouring hells, occasional hells. Very graphic. Now, we're modern Western people. Do we believe in that? Maybe yes, maybe not. But look, I think we can investigate from the point of view, is that potentially a psychological reality for us? And absolutely that is the case. And for me, when I think when we die, because at the moment we're anchored by our body and our senses in terms of this human environment. And we see this human environment probably in a fairly limited way. We know that people have the magic mushroom trip or the acid trip. They get different experiences. And we certainly know that some people have what the hippies used to call bad trips. And other people had trips that were okay. So the same thing at the time when we're dying, and this is partly the reason I told the story of this guy who was absolutely terrified, if for some people the visions that arise at the time of death are hell-like visions or experiences. Other people, it's different. I know a guy I was sort of with when I was with him and his family when he was dying, and some of the people in the room, certainly not me, could see some beings who came down who were there to help, who were peaceful and there to help guide him in terms of the time, at this moment when he was dying. I didn't see that, but some of the other ladies in the room, they were aware of that. So for some people, there's the process of death can be beautiful and they're at ease. For other people, it's not. And so, if you've got those sorts of visions at the time of death, what's arising in your consciousness, the physical environment your consciousness will go to is going to match what's going on in your mind. And that experience for them will be real. That will be their reality. So the Buddhist texts do give. They are really graphic and quite very literal and very scary. I mean, for us, we've got our rational mind, so it's really hard for us to accept that. But it's something for us to explore and think about. But look, there's no one out there meting out punishment as such. It's a ripening of our own karma that we have created ourselves, no one else. In terms of how we bring up our children, you are part of dealing with kids. You set boundaries, you put in consequences, you give them love, and you try and do that in a balanced way. But being ordinary human beings, we don't always do it right. We don't always do it correctly, but the main thing is we try and maintain our love for them, and that's more important, and try and guide them in a way so they become better, kind, warm human beings as best we can. But, we don't always succeed. They've got their own karma as well. So there's only so much we can't control them, or lead their life for them. We have to accept that as well. Okay, unless there's a burning... Oh, okay.
I just wanted to ask, if you have a relationship with someone in your life that's causing a lot of suffering for both parties, from a Buddhist perspective, when is it better to stay and show compassion and patience for that person, or is it better to just sort of love them and leave them, if that makes sense?
Okay, so the question is, if you're in relation to someone and that's getting difficult or being harmed, should you stick with them or say, goodbye, I'm heading off, this isn't good for me? Look, to some extent you've got to use your own wisdom in terms of what's best for you and the other person. And often staying in it depends how difficult the situation is. Often staying in difficult situations is really hard. And do you really want to do that to yourself? I mean, there is no law in Buddhism saying you have to stay married for life. I mean, if you're bringing up children together, that becomes a bit more complicated. And then you've got to work out what's best for the children. Your focus really needs to be what's best for the children as well. But look, for a relationship to work from the point of view of Buddhism, if you're in the relationship for your own happiness, it can't work. It's as simple as that. You've got to have some... You're there to try and help the other person be happy, not this person's going to make me happy. And this goes back to our 8 worldly concerns. The person, perhaps object, is there to make to give me happiness. And clearly, if that's not working, there's some sort of mistake. But each person's sort of got to talk to their friends, and think about themselves. What's appropriate for me in this situation? What's the wisest thing to do? And you've got to look after your own well-being. And if you've got, look, it's interesting. If you're a very good practitioner, being around difficult beings is a huge bonus for your practice. If you're at that level. And there's a thing called the 8 verses of thought training, which actually talk about the preciousness of difficult individuals in your life, because they give you a chance to progress. But if you're not progressing or being destroyed, that's a different story. And there's 2 things. One, do I stay there? And the other thing, of course, we can use Buddhism to try and use the techniques within Buddhism to try and help us survive in that situation or get through it. But yeah, look, it's up to, I can't give a specific advice. You go.
So you can't, like, patience and compassion can only get you so far as a person with compassionate feelings.
Well, look, we always want patience and compassion regardless. There's no doubt about it. But if you're in a difficult relationship, you know, the arguments can get fairly ferocious, or the words that's said can get fairly tough, can't they? Or whatever's happening in terms of that. So, you know, we've got to work out. Yeah, each person's sort of got to work out what's best in terms of whether it's healthy to stay or it's better to go. And yeah. Okay, so it's 8:09, so we've gone over time by 8 minutes. Hopefully I won't get punished. But look, let's first of all, so we've come together, we've had some lovely discussion, hopefully we've had some nice experience of meditation, we've thought about how our mind works and got a bit more inspiration, developed more awareness and love and compassion, etc. So let's dedicate that positive energy that it becomes a cause for both ourselves to develop and and to be able to benefit all living beings as much as possible for the rest of this life and to make a good use of this life as we can. So just have a moment or two to develop that sort of energy. So, thank you everyone for your coming tonight and the previous weeks and your attention, your questions, and hopefully it's been useful for you. For me, it's useful for me because it makes me think about things I probably wouldn't think about too much. So thank you for that opportunity. So thanks everyone. There's a cup of tea outside if you want. And of course, Damien's next week with 4 weeks of karma. So don't miss it. Because Damien's got his engineering mind, it's very analytical. And he'll go through it step by step in a lot of detail. But make sure you quiz him, don't let him off the hook. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks. Okay.